Speaker to step down, and thanks all very much for coming in. Douglas Carswell, you started this whole ball rolling. Are you pleased with the result?
Well, Parliament and the Commons is still in a hole, but at least we've stopped digging. We now have a Speaker who I think is committed to reform. He wasn't my first choice, but he's committed to reform. I hope we now see some really radical change.
Was he your second choice?
He was, yes. My first choice was Richard Shepherd. Unfortunately, he went out in the first round. I voted for John Bercow because I very much hope that he's going to be effective as Speaker at holding a future Conservative government to account.
You seem to be alone, dare we say, on your side of the bench. There weren't very many Tories looking happy at that choice tonight.
I voted for John Bercow because I think he's going to be effective at holding a future Conservative government to account. I hope that other people who voted for him voted for the same reason. Other Conservatives, it was a secret ballot, they voted for who they felt was the best candidate, but I think we have to accept the results.
Parmjit Dhanda, a Labour victory?
Well, I think people voted right the way across political dividing lines. I know people from my side who voted for Sir George Young. I know people who changed their vote. People voted for a whole range of reasons. I don't think it was actually a red-blue split, actually. A lot of it is down to relationships. People have known each other for very many years, sat on committees with each other. Sometimes it's just, people that you get to know within Parliament, or sometimes it's due to the lobbying that's been happening over a period of time.
You said something very interesting in your speech. You said, we want people to thank us for this tomorrow. Will they?
I think John has got good credentials as a reformer. We'll be watching very carefully in the next 12 months that he does the things that he says he's going to do. But I think it's important that he's given the time and the opportunity to do that. Everyone's
been very cautious, Kelvin. I'm sure you won't be. Do you think when people look at this tomorrow, they will say, yes, this is a proper fresh start, we can begin again?
Well, I think most ordinary people will be puzzled by all this anyway, because if you look back 10 years ago, the appointment of the Speaker would have been lucky to have made 2 paragraphs on page 12 of The Sun. It was not an event of any kind. And I have my doubts about how big an event this is going to be. Bercow may want to do all kinds of things, but in the end he's going to have to carry the leadership of the Tory party and the Labour Party with him, and I'm not sure he can do that. And after all, he's got most people, ordinary people, the voter, are looking about this through expenses scandals. Now, if you take the Bible on this, the Daily Telegraph, they say that he was involved in flipping, and when asked, did you pay capital gains tax on your £300,000 gain, he said, I can't remember. Now, most of us, I think, can remember a capital gains tax. So my issue is he has a massive question mark over him, and I'm not sure that ordinary people will say, Bercow, oh yes, he's the answer.
Douglas Carswell, does it matter that he comes with that particular millstone allegation?
Here's my second preference. I'm not here as part of his campaign team. What I would say is this. The House of Commons needs to begin a process of radical reform, and I think we need to, looking ahead over the next month, the next set of expenses that are going to be published, we need to make sure that we get this right. We need to begin the process of transparency, of real reform, of significant, substantial reform. Let's see if the new Speaker can lead on that.
Parmjit Dhanda, what has he got to do for that radical reform? To wake up the Sun readers, if you like, and say, wow, this is something we haven't seen before?
I think the Sun readers actually probably want to see somebody who's going to be a driver for change rather than just a referee at PMQs. Someone that actually does more than actually spends their time in the House, but actually tries to connect with the public. Now, the things that I was proposing were around actually involving the public in internet voting, deciding what the topical debate is, actually moving apparatus from Westminster out into the country. I hope John takes some of that on. But it was interesting. It was interesting to hear Cameron. That was too radical, right? So maybe it was too radical, but it was interesting to hear Cameron today and Nick Clegg, and I think also Gordon Brown to some extent, actually say we want to give this guy his head to be a driver.
I've never heard so much cobblers in my life as their speeches. After all, it was only a week or so ago that they were saying what a shame it is that you're going, Michael Martin. How did this all happen? They're simply playing politics with it. They're saying to the voter, look, we're doing something. It's not very important, but it's got a lot of publicity around it. This is not a big deal being made Speaker of the House of Commons. You know that. You know that.
It hasn't been traditionally, but it could be.
A really interesting point in his speech, and he talked about, in essence, direct democracy. The idea that those we elect to represent us in politics are more accountable to us. And you suggested, and I loved it, the idea that we have a right of initiative. Ordinary people can decide what's on Parliament's agenda, what we as politicians do, what we vote on. This is the sort of agenda that I think people want to reconnect.
So what does that mean? Sort of appearing on Newsnight, appearing on GMTV, is that a connection, do you think?
Well, I honestly don't believe the Speaker can achieve anything without Cameron or who's going to replace Brown after the next election, right, saying, I agree with you. I don't think he can be a shop steward for 646 MPs and simply go to the leadership of the parties and say, this is what we want. And if we don't get it, then we're going to throw you out. Do you think that can happen?
He's the first Speaker who has real authority because he owes his position to the support of members of the legislature, not to government whips. That gives him a huge mandate for change. I think if he weds his reformist agenda to that of David Cameron, we could see some far-reaching radical change.
And if he doesn't, he's out, presumably, by the next election.
Well, let's see. Let's give the guy. Let's give him a chance. We've gone through a rough patch. We've got a reformist Speaker. He's got a clear mandate. Let's see what he does with it.
Well, I think absolutely right. He's got to be a champion for the House, not necessarily a shop steward, a champion for it. But in order to actually champion the House, first you've got to change it. And I think he will be given his head to actually make some fairly radical reforms. And I hope that he is actually really radical and takes that opportunity.
In the autumn, I'm proposing a bill that would allow ordinary people to trigger by-elections if they're dissatisfied with their MP, or petition their returning officer so every voter has a say as to who the candidate is.
So you would be getting rid of him in 6 months' time?
That's not to get rid of speakers, it's to get rid of indolent and lazy MPs.
OK, thank you all very much indeed. Thanks for coming in. For a profile of the career of John Bercow, do check out David Grossman's latest version of Village People on our website.